Society Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Peter Suchmann, on today's episode of People, Kindest People on HMTV. My special guest, Arielle Korman, is with us today, and we're going to have a conversation that I think will really, really fascinate you, the audience. Arielle, one of the themes of this podcast is Basheret. We were meant to find each other and to meet each other. I would love to tell the audience a little bit about how we met through your grandpa, Manny Korman. Could you start that story off, and I'll jump in and we'll get the story right, I'm sure.
Yes. So a couple years ago now, I received an urgent call from my father, Jerry, that somebody had written in the Kinderlink, the Kindertransport Association's newsletter, and was looking for a violin player.
So what had happened was my father, who was 96, unfortunately we lost him to COVID, and my father had a violin, and the story of the violin goes back to England during the Blitz. My parents were both Kindertransport from Austria to England, and my father, when he got to England in 1938, was 14 years old. And he already had a love of music, I think, from his early childhood in Vienna. And the music store, I believe, had been bombed. And there was a clearance sale on the violins and the instruments in the store. My father picked out a violin, and he said that it had survived fire and water, I guess because the store had been hit and damaged, and water was needed to put the fire out. And he worked on that violin for over a year, oiling it, and I don't know what else you do to care for a violin that's gone through that. But he loved that violin, and he played it constantly. He loved it, but he never achieved great musicality with it. And you're laughing, I'm laughing. But we quite a while ago, got my mom a pair of headphones and a Walkman to play music when my dad practiced, because it was a little bit painful. But he loved the violin, and throughout his later years, we had people come and play duets with him. Started in New Jersey, where he lived with my mom in a 55 and over community. And then when my mom passed from Parkinson's, we brought my dad to Long Island so my brother and I could take care of him. And the violin was very special to him, and we knew that after we lost him, we needed to find a home for that violin. So I wrote an article for the Kinderlink newsletter. So it was your dad that read it. I always thought it was your grandfather.
Well, they both, I think probably my grandfather read it, then called my dad. But I got the initial call from my dad, and it was very clear. It was, there is someone looking for a violin, and you're the person.
Yes, and it was Basheret. So we met you, we met your father, we met your grandfather, and we fell in love. We knew that you were the right person. You are a rabbi in training.
Yes.
You're a musician. You're a singer. I grew up with an expression that I think you would agree with: music is love. It has a very special ability to create strong emotions. And when we met you, we felt that intensity within you. So we were delighted to give you the violin. And that's where our story begins. And then we'll talk later about Alli Halpert and the song Loosen, which I love to this day. And there's a quote from that song I'd like to talk about. But let's digress a little bit.
Okay.
That's the beginning of the story. Another part of the story I'd like to explore with you is I knew what it was like growing up with parents who had gone through the Holocaust. What was it like for you with a grandfather that had gone through the Holocaust? If you can give us a little bit of the story that you've heard growing up.
I think it's really important for those of us in second and third generation to have that conversation. How is it similar and how is it actually quite different?
Yes.
I'm very lucky that my grandfather has been such a strong presence in my life.
Yeah.
He lives in Great Neck. In the beginning of my life, he lived in Queens. He's never been far. I grew up on the Upper West Side.
Another element of the Basheret, I taught in Great Neck for 40 years. So
Right.
there were so many connections that were happening there. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm really blessed that we saw him almost every Friday night growing up. He was really present. And at the same time, a grandparent is different from a parent. You're not living with the grandparent
Right.
most of the time, every single day. And so in a lot of ways, I had a relationship with my grandfather, and I also had a relationship with him. So I had a relationship with him directly,
Right.
and a relationship with him through my father.
Right.
And in that way, a grandparent is this sort of special presence in your life who is both someone, hopefully but also someone who's already a little bit mythic while they're alive. And you get so many stories about them, and you meet an older version of them who's grown up. My grandfather is in his 90s, and he's still growing up, which is sort of amazing to watch. He's changing the way that we all do.
And he's traveling the United States.
Yes.
He's telling his stories. And I know he presented to the Mensa Foundation.
Yes.
And is he a member of Mensa? Do you know?
He's not, but
his
he's
memory
having
is unbelievable. The details that he can relate
Yeah.
in his stories just blow my mind, really.
Yeah. So I've always looked up to him. I've always loved hanging out with him.
Yeah, yeah, I
he's
get
just
that.
he's just a great person.
Yeah.
And he's also he's an incredibly passionate person, and
Yes.
he's an incredibly optimistic person. So I feel very lucky to have gotten to know him
Right.
in a part of his life, I think, where it had been several decades
Right.
since the events of his childhood.
Do you think that his decision to become a teacher was fashioned out of his childhood experiences?
So I'm so glad you're going to talk to him directly.
Yeah.
I
will,
And
I
so
will.
I'm curious to see
In a few weeks,
what he
we'll-
thinks of this podcast.
Yeah.
I think definitely.
Yeah.
I think particularly the fact that he survived as a child.
Right.
And he survived alongside his brother,
Right.
who was just a couple years older, but had to assume the role of a parent while the two of them were
Right.
navigating Europe together. My grandfather cares so deeply about children
Yeah.
and about their rights, what they're owed, what they're capable of.
Right.
He takes children very seriously. He really speaks to every child like they're a full person, because they are.
Yeah.
So I think his passion for education, for public education in particular, is kind of unparalleled in its strength, and is a passion that has been very influential and inspiring for me, and has given me a little bit of a fire under my tuchus also to do something good with my life.
So let's explore that. I have some notes here. You're a Jewish musician. You're a co-founder of Ammud, the Jews of Color Torah Academy.
Yes.
You're a lover of long melodies, words with many meanings, and singing to survive. What is all that about?
Well, I would say that my introduction to spirituality was music
Yes.
and art. Other forms of art as well, but really the household I grew up in was so musical. My father had a baby grand in our relatively small 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side when I was young. My mother was a dancer with Martha Graham.
Oh, wow.
In her earlier career. So there were
music and
artists,
dance. Yeah.
yes,
Wow.
and in particular those art forms are so intertwined.
Right.
So often dance is paired with music in a
Yes.
really intentional way. So I experienced the power of music before I had language for God or
Right.
for the experience of divinity. The way that music can change how a room feels
Yeah.
is something I find quite magical.
Yeah.
And you can't touch music,
Right.
but
But you can be touched by
you can
it.
you can be touched by it.
Something here that really caught my eye. You worked with gratitude lists. Is that still
Yes.
something you do? I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really
Something
important.
that's missing a lot in the world today is gratitude.
Yes, I have been thinking a lot lately about the things we train ourselves to think.
Yeah.
So I think the world can be a really scary place. I know the world can be a very scary place, and it's easy, particularly when you have a family legacy, a family story like we do.
Yes.
That is so full of tragedy.
Yeah.
To get into a very cynical and heavy mindset.
Yeah.
So gratitude lists are a practice of just saying small things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
A lot of food is on my gratitude list. I'm grateful for an egg and cheese on a roll, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But a small piece of that's something good, and then it can be bigger. I'm grateful that I grew up with my grandfather.
Yes.
Absolutely. But all those little reminders, from the little reminders to the big ones, if you have a practice of writing gratitude lists, I think it can help train your mind to not only go to the cynical thing, but to remember that there are other things as well.
So you're a rabbinical student now.
Yes.
You have a master's in religion from the seminary from Columbia University.
The master's is from Columbia University, and I'm at the Jewish Theological Seminary now.
Yes. And you had a Fulbright Research Fellowship in Israel.
Yes,
What's that?
did.
I don't really know too much about that.
After college, I lived in Haifa and Jerusalem, and I was doing academic research.
Okay.
Thinking that I wanted to go into the academy for my career, and I was studying Judaism. I was studying religion, and at some point in my experience at Columbia, and I'm very grateful I got my master's, I started to realize that the type of papers I wanted to write, I didn't want to force my professors at Columbia to read them. The type of paper I wanted to write was, 10 pages of whatever the academic topic was, and then 10 pages of, and here's how it's relevant to a moral Jewish life in the contemporary world. And I thought, okay, this is actually different. I want to apply this knowledge.
Right. And is a Fulbright scholarship something that is earned through academic grades, or?
Grades are part of it, but there's an application.
You're beautiful and brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things that really intrigued me was you contacted us after you got my dad's violin. I shouldn't call it. It's your violin. And,
we share it.
You worked with a musician, Alli Halpert.
Yes.
And there was a song, Loosen. And there's something here. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name will you ease the pain. I don't know why, but that resonates with me because I think we're all feeling the weight of the world these days. And I know for me, I go to Loosen all the time. I'm sitting on my computer and I just go to Spotify and there it is. And it really is like a breath of fresh air for me. There's something magical about the music. Is that something we can unpack here? Music is love. I get that. But music transcends somehow. And there's something about that song, and I love a lot of the other songs too, but is there something special about that song?
There's definitely something special about that song. I experienced that song kind of like an incantation.
It's almost like a meditation. It's very repetitive. The music is beautiful. Her voice is beautiful. And I believe the violin you're playing on that song is our violin. So very special.
Very special. Yeah. Alli is an incredible musician, and we talk a lot about the process of music making. We were very lucky to go on tour with each other a couple years ago, and sometimes songs come through Alli, which doesn't take away any of her agency in writing them and sort of capturing them. But I think there's something.
So that's Alli Halpert, Halpert, on Spotify, probably elsewhere also. So I'd like to step back now and just read a little bit about what you wrote. I was asked to write an article about our shared experience with the violin, and you wrote something also. And I think the audience would appreciate, because not only are you a musician, but you are a gifted writer. The moment I put bow to string, I felt something shift within me, like finally finding the tuning peg to a string I hadn't realized had been out of tune. The violin moaned. This violin yelled. This violin belted like a cantor from the pulpit of a caverner's wooden shul before it burned. Its depth, its darkness, its tearful joy at its own existence. This was my voice projected through this violin. This, too, I understood was Robert's voice. That's my father. One of a child grown too soon. One of a child grown too soon who needed something to love and care for in a world so keen on denying him that love. In other words, when he got to England, he was alone. He had come with, I don't know how many other children, one of 10,000 children, but he was not adopted as many of the children were. He ended up in hostels. And there had to be a loneliness element to that. And I think the violin was an answer to that loneliness. I have pictures of my dad performing in the underground in England during the Blitz when people were down underground for cover. He and a few friends would break out the musical instruments and play music for them. So when you wrote that, it just took my breath away. So is that something? When you first played the violin, can you relate that back to the audience?
Yeah. So I grew up playing violin. I was classically trained when I was young. It started to be not so into classical music. Now I actually like it a lot better. Right. But at the time I was angsty. I didn't want to play it. And I started getting interested in jazz and folk music and other genres. And for the most part, and maybe classical musicians will argue with me, a classical violin should sound pretty clear, right, so that you can be the one manipulating the sound. But a violin that's appropriate for folk music, which right, it means the music of the people.
Right.
I like a violin that has texture.
Right.
And has its sort of own strong personality that you have to work with and right, sort of bring your own interpretation to.
Right.
This violin is one of those violins,
right,
that has a history, and yeah, I think even scientifically, if you were to sort of zoom in at what's going on with the wood, I think right, the fact that it did live through fire and water and conditions that a violin is not supposed to endure,
right,
it adds to the character, and it just so happens that it added to the character of this instrument in a way that's not bad, which is awesome.
So it has, would you say it has an unusual tone to it? Or?
To me, it does. I mean, yeah, it's not so unheard of to have an instrument that has this sort of depth, but I would say, a viola, you look to a viola for right, those really rich low
right,
tones,
right,
and the low tones that you can get from this violin are incredibly rich right, for a violin and not a viola.
So what does it mean to you when you write that one of your passions, I think, is healing music, Jewish healing music? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. How does that make its presence known to you?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, any music can be healing music,
right,
if you treat it that way. But if you call music healing music, it's an invitation to the listener to treat it that way.
Right.
So oftentimes, Alli and I are part of a sort of musical scene where we do a lot of communal singing, where it doesn't always have to sound so perfect,
right,
but it should be a song that people can sing along with, or that you're willing to teach people.
Right.
So it's really an approach to music, but I think that there's also a way of writing music with an eye toward how might somebody in need of healing use this music.
Right.
So I have some songs that I've written after I wrote them. I listened back and I thought, I don't know if I like this right now, but I have a funny feeling that it has a little bit of that quality, a little bit of that healing quality. Yeah. And at that point, the music is beyond you. Once you write it, once you produce it, you don't control how people will
right,
receive it.
Sure.
And sometimes you just know that a song has that potential.
So I also understand that you sing. Is that something you can do while you're playing the violin, or is that are those two separate?
It's something that one can do. I'm not very good at it.
Okay.
Just because it has to do with the positioning of the instrument.
And you said earlier on the drive up here that you play the violin as a fiddle.
Sometimes. Yes. So I went to college in North Carolina, Davidson College, and there was a great Appalachian music scene happening around me.
Right.
And so I learned some of that music. And I love that type of music.
Right.
I think this instrument, for whatever reason, I don't know how your father would feel about this,
Right.
but this instrument is excellent for fiddle.
That's so interesting. So the violin is played to the chin. When you fiddle, the violin is not on your chin?
It depends.
You can fiddle?
Yeah, everyone's got their own style. Some of the old dudes they'll hold it
Maybe
really
that's what
low,
I'm thinking back, yeah.
but it's not the only way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, although no, I was going to say fiddling is faster than playing the violin, but no.
It's a
I've seen
style.
violinists
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
go very quickly through music. It's amazing. So tell me more about the journey you're on now. So you're in rabbinical school.
Yes.
How long is that process?
Generally 5 years,
5
and I'm in
years.
year 3. So finishing up second semester of year 3.
Okay. And then what? What do you think?
Then what? You're putting me on the spot.
I know.
We'll see.
I know.
But it's
hard
going,
to predict the future right now.
It's hard to predict the future, but it'll be a combination of all the things that I'm already doing and
Right.
passionate about: Jewish education,
Yeah.
Jewish music,
Yeah.
ritual. I particularly love working with couples getting married. You know, being
Nice.
involved in life cycle events
Yes.
is a real gift
Yeah.
to me as a
Right.
as a budding rabbi, and makes me feel so connected to the tradition.
Yeah. It's wonderful for me because I think we discussed this earlier on the way up again. My parents thought that they were Basheret because my father's grandfather was a chazan. My mother's grandfather was a chazan, both in Vienna. They both lived in the 2nd District. That's where they grew up. And my parents always felt that they were Basheret because 2 generations earlier, their grandparents had been a teacher and a student to each other. And now here we are, the violin is in new hands, and you're a little bit of a chazan, shall we say, a rabbi in training, and it's full circle. And I know my parents are smiling down on us right now. My mother's thrilled that the violin is making wonderful music, and my father is thrilled the violin is making music. That would be so important to him. So can we show the violin? Can we?
Yeah, let's take it out.
It's in the original case, I think. My father, yeah.
original case.
Yeah.
Yes. Here we are. You can see.
The wood looks beautiful.
Yeah, the wood is beautiful.
Yeah.
It is stunning. And you can see here, it's got texture.
Yeah.
It's been through some
Yes.
stuff.
But
it's gorgeous.
I never really stopped to think about it. Are the darker areas probably fire damage?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I would actually love to talk to someone who really knows. And
Yeah.
the next time I take it in to get repaired,
Yeah.
we'll ask those questions.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. He did a good job, though. He did a really
He
good
was
job.
very proud of it. He was very proud of the
preserving it.
violin. I
Yeah.
know that when we brought people in to play duets with him, they would always take quite a bit of time listening to my father's stories about the violin and its history.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. So we'd like to do another show. We'd like to get some music on the air, shall we say?
Fabulous.
So we'll ask you to either Zoom in with us with Alli and talk more about healing music. I think we all need a little bit of healing music these days in our life. So we have a special treat for you. When Arielle came to our house and met us with her dad and her grandfather, she picked up the violin and played some music for you. It's a very special few minutes of music. So sit back, relax, enjoy. This is Arielle on my dad's violin for the first time making beautiful music. thank you so much for this episode.
Thank you so much, Peter.
It's really been very special. I don't know if you realize just how special you are to our family, that you are continuing on in that tradition. I'd like to thank you for tuning into this episode of People, Kindest People on HMTV. I appreciate my guest, Arielle Korman. Thank you so much for making the schlep out from New York, for sharing some highlights. And be sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. Until next time, take care, be well, and remember, music is love. That's my message for the day.